We are creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective, moments in time captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Hey guys, it's Darian Douglas. Welcome to the second season of the Working Artist Project. In fact, if you're back after the first season, welcome home. And if you're not, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. I sit down with some of the most influential and talented artists from multiple fields, and we discuss the challenges of constructing a successful career as an artist. You will be inspired and motivated after listening to these amazing people conquer challenges and live life on their terms. Welcome to the Working Artist Project. Today I want to welcome Jason Marshall to the Working Artist Project.
Hello.
Yeah, man, you got to get a little closer.
Do I? Okay.
Yeah, that's good. So, man, I want to start just with you telling me where you're from and how you got started and why you chose the baritone saxophone.
I was born in Washington, D.C., raised in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay.
I got started playing music because there was always music in the house. There was always a piano. My mother sang. My folks, put on a lot of events through an organization that they ran called the National Black Media Coalition, which was a media advocacy group.
Oh, cool.
So I experienced art and entertainment that way. I mean, I met the Nicholas Brothers.
I don't even know who that is.
The Nicholas Brothers?
Yeah.
Two of the greatest dancers that ever did live.
Okay.
I met Louis Gossett Jr., Quincy Jones, Eartha Kitt, Tommy Davidson before he was known.
Wow.
So many people. So many people. So to an extent, art was always, black art was always around.
Mm-hmm.
And there was never a separation between that and daily life.
And your parents, they were musicians, or they
my
were artists?
My mother sings beautifully even now, but they were not, strictly speaking, musicians in that way. Although my mother was, when she was younger, she did sing in groups and so forth.
Okay.
But that was not their profession in my lifetime. Was never music in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So during the end of third grade, the school system where I went to school and matriculated, Montgomery County school systems, there was always a musical presentation at the end of third grade, and you'd see people play instruments and explain what was different about instruments. And then during that summer, you then had an option to decide to play an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked the saxophone. Before that, though, my brother and sister and we all took piano lessons. So you were going to experience instrumental music at some point in life growing up in my household.
Okay.
But at the end of third grade, I picked saxophone and alto.
Oh, so you started on alto.
Alto was what was available unless you were exceptionally large for fourth grade, and then you had tenor. But
right.
I didn't know from alto and tenor. I just knew saxophone. Mm-hmm. And so they took me to Washington Music Center in Silver Spring, and they rented me a saxophone.
Oh.
And that's what happened. And then the end of the fourth grade year, I presented a particular aptitude for it, and so they bought it, and I went to a music camp the summer between fourth and fifth grade, and I was able to get a few things together, to the extent a fifth grader can.
Okay.
And during that camp, there was a guy named Montrell Smith, and he played baritone, and he was like the star of the camp, so. It's funny because he reached out to me recently. We touch base every few years, But he reached out and said, hey, and I don't know if he still plays, but that's where I first saw a baritone being played in person, was at that camp. And then the next year, I played alto still, but the baritone was something that I still had to kind of figure out. And so in sixth grade, I had access to it. I actually got into a fight in 6th grade band.
Okay.
And I was kept in for recess because of that fight. And during that time where I was not allowed to go out, there was a baritone in the instrument room. Mm-hmm. And because the infraction was in music class, the detention, so to speak, was in music class too. And so I started rummaging through the instrument closet and found a baritone, and that's how I got started.
Okay, so you're in detention, supposed to be chilling, you looking through instruments.
Well, that was probably the safest thing for me to do at the time.
Right.
But yeah, my teacher at the time was a woman named Holly Pasquale, and to look back, I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity, because she was always interested in her students truly knowing music. And I even remember when she said, Jason, you don't know how to read music. And I was supposed to have known it by then.
Right.
But I didn't. And so she made sure that I got that together in middle school.
Was she like giving you guys after class or something like that?
She had, in hindsight, I realized she had a gift for recognizing aptitude for music.
Okay.
So whereas other students, she might not have been so forthright about learning how to read and how to play and perform, stand up in front of people. She was intent that I get those things together. Mm-hmm. So I realize now that she saw something that needed a push, and she pushed, and here we are.
Okay, cool, man. So that was 6th grade.
That was 6th grade.
You chose baritone,
mm-hmm.
And so you started just playing. Did you take it home, or what was the vibe on that?
I took it home. Yeah, over the summer I took it home, and practiced it to the extent possible, and played along with records. And my folks had a fabulous music collection, so it was. I mean, even now, the first time I heard baritone in the setting that really appealed to me, it was George Benson Cookbook. Ronnie Cuber and Lonnie Smith and Jimmy Lovelace on drums. Some of that was Charlie Persip on drums.
Yeah.
But yeah, my parents already had that stuff, and they already had all of the hits, all Earl Klugh and just Earth, Wind and Fire and
the whole thing.
Everybody.
Yeah, man. So later you got to play with Roy Hargrove.
You skip it all the way.
He's just all the way. Yeah. So I'm assuming that's New York time. That's college, right?
Yeah. When I met Roy, I was in undergrad at the new school. I met him at a jam session.
Okay.
Because you could still meet people at jam sessions at that time. And I saw then that he was responsive to my persistence. I was always out playing.
Okay.
I would never just hang. I'd never show up without my horn. I'd never show up and not play. So one thing that I recognize about then that I see is perhaps different now is that there is a noticeable lack of persistence. Folks only show up when they get to make up all the rules and call all the tunes. And yeah, when I showed up, everyone I knew showed up, and we would make the best out of whatever was there.
Right.
So whatever the tunes were, whatever the rhythm section was, we would play and make the most out of it. Mm-hmm. And so I met Roy either at Cleopatra's Needle, which is still there in some form or fashion, or I met Roy at a place called Niagara, which at that time was on East 7th and Avenue A. I don't know if it's still there. If it's still there, I don't believe they have live music in there anymore.
Right. Yeah, I never heard of that place.
But those were the places. And there was Up Over, but that was in Brooklyn. So if you didn't go to Brooklyn a lot, then perhaps you wouldn't have experienced Up Over. There was a guy named Bob who ran it. They called him Up Over Bob.
Okay.
And that's where I met Marcus and EJ. That's where I met Jaleel Shaw.
Cats.
That's where I met Walter Smith. That's where I met that group of folks. Up Over was kind of their scene. Laurent Thomas, that's everyone who was like up and coming at the time I got to town, which is 2003.
Okay.
That was what was going on at the time.
So your first gig with Roy, like Were you prepared? Were you unprepared?
No.
What happened?
The first gig I was not prepared for. I didn't expect it to happen. I saw Roy enough at jam sessions, and we played enough together and had enough conversations where he eventually started saying, "Oh, we're gonna play one day, man. We're gonna play." He kept saying that. And he said, "Give me your number." And he had always said it, and after a while, he said, "Okay, he keeps saying
easy, right?"
and he said it enough times, and then one day he called me on the phone, and that was in the year 2004.
Okay.
Roy has not called me on the telephone since then. I ended up working with him for a long time, but that was the first and perhaps only time he himself called me on the phone. Wow. He said, "Hey man, I got this gig at the Hollywood Bowl, and I want to know if you can make it." He called, left a message because I didn't hit the phone.
That's the jazz festival?
Yeah, it was
in LA,
right? The Playboy Jazz Festival,
yeah.
The Hollywood Bowl, and he said, "Yeah, I got this band. We got a new record out, and I don't know if you can make it to gigs this weekend." He called me like Thursday. The gig was Saturday, and can you make it? The answer obviously is yes. He said, "Okay, my manager will call you, get the record, learn the music." I said yes, hung up the phone, and I didn't realize, I didn't know what record he was talking about. Because at that time, the only thing that I listened to was baritone saxophone players. Oh, that I didn't, I was aware of more or less what everything else was going on, but right. I didn't. All I listened to was baritone saxophone and rhythm section. That was it. And so he said he had a record out, and at the time I lived in a place with 4 other roommates.
Okay.
And one of them had the record.
So it's 5 of y'all in there.
There's 5 of us in there.
Damn.
And it was a typical New York apartment where you open the door, it's just a long hallway with one room at the end, right, and a bunch of rooms along the way.
Right.
And my roommate at the time had the record. I borrowed the record, transcribed the whole record on the airplane on the way there. One of the skills that I acquired fairly early was transcription.
Okay.
That has served me very well through the years. So I got the record, and I didn't even know what on the record he wanted me to know. So I just transcribed everything.
Damn. A 5-hour plane ride.
Yeah. I mean, I got a little bit of a head start listening to it, in a day or so. I had my hands on it before I had to get on the plane. But my mother sang to me, so my ears were always strong.
Right.
My ears were always strong. I'm deaf in one ear now, which is totally unrelated to music, and I wear a hearing aid. But the muscle memory, so to speak, is still there. Mm-hmm. So I could listen to something a few times, and without the aid of an instrument, write it down. And so that's what I did with that record. I wrote it down.
Damn.
And this, again, this is one of those skills you don't wear on your sleeve. You have it in there when you need it. You deal with it.
Right.
So I transcribed the record, and I got there. I got to California, and met everyone in the airport. And I remember I got to the airport, and Reggie Washington, the bass player, had his hat pulled down over his eyes. He was sitting on the chair. And they're like, "Yeah, that's the bass player." And I'm like, "Okay." Then Renee Newville, and at the time it was Keith Anderson playing saxophone, and Jason Thomas on drums, and also Willie Jones. He carried 2 drummers at the time.
Okay.
And Todd Parsons on guitar, and Roy. And that was the band, and that was the beginning of all the big stuff. That was the first time I had met anyone other than Roy. Maybe I had met. Maybe I didn't meet Wynton by then, but just so the brand names that we all